Oh man, that needs to be a skit somewhere, doesn't it? It's just so poetic.
Yeah, it is fantastic. I picked it out as well. As you say, God's sense of humour is unbelievable.
Welcome to the Bible in 1 Year podcast, brought to you by two Brits and a Bible. If you like the idea of a casual yet meaningful chat about the Bible with a couple of mates, listen in. Something in here could be good for you.
Today's day 151, covering Esther 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. If you need a brief overview of those chapters, they're in the description.
All right, sunshine. Can I keep my perfect record intact on the old rock, paper, scissors?
3, 2, 1. Yes! I win!
I was so torn between paper and scissors. I changed it. Good on you, sir.
I mean, thank you. Finally, what was that, 6th or 7th attempt, finally? In fairness, I was going to give you a bit of smack talk. I was going to be like, I've got nothing to lose and you've got everything to lose, or something like that. You have a spotless record. I have nothing but shame and humiliation, which is something that's going to come up today's reading, funny enough. Anyway, so we're just going to pull across, Adam and I both had from Esther 5, just the fact that Esther shows patience and self-restraint, not blurting out her request immediately to the king, but first inviting Haman to a banquet and then slowly working up to the request. Just there's a lot of wisdom in that, not being patient. Again, it's kind of a God's timing thing and being obedient thing and all that stuff. So we both wanted to mention that from yesterday because we didn't quite get that in. We both did 6-1. I think that Adam's is funnier than mine. I basically just said the divine providence of the fact that the king calls his servants to read some chronicles from those chroniclers of the past to him because he couldn't sleep. And out of 20, he apparently ordered 20 books of the chronicles. And of all the books, of all the pages of the books, the pages that he ended up reading were the books about Mordecai's loyalty to him and saving him and so on, which is just outrageous, really. And obviously, God's hand is on that.
Yeah, it's cool. I like it. So, yeah, like you mentioned, I wrote basically that it's like the Chronicles are a good book to fall asleep to. But what I love about it as well is that at that stage, the Chronicles were simply like past events. Really, right now it's a book in the Bible, but for him it was like, can you tell me what's happened previously? Let's look back over the last few years. And so it's kind of cool the way that it's done that. And it's decent, isn't it?
It's decent.
So then we go on to, at that stage, Mordecai being honored in Esther 6, and it's just this God's timing thing. And this, I love it because it's so fantastic, where the king's trying to think of ways to honor Mordecai, but Haman thinks he's getting honored, and so he asks Haman, what should I do to someone that I want to honor? And Haman, who of course doesn't have God's timing and patience and trying to just let stuff happen, he's like, well, I suggest you get them a nice horse and you put them in a nice robe and you like parade them around the city and all this stuff. And he's like, that's a great idea, I'll do that. Hey, go get Mordecai, who's the guy that Haman wants to have killed, and you lead him around the city. Oh man, that needs to be a skit somewhere, doesn't it? It's just so poetic.
Yeah, it is fantastic. I picked it out as well for exactly the same reason. So just as you say, God's sense of humor is unbelievable. It's fantastic. I think you'll go next, actually, potentially. Otherwise, I was just going to say about the hanging of Haman, obviously, on his own gallows.
The impaling rather than the hanging. I suppose it depends which version you read. For me, he was impaled on a friggin' massive spike that he had, which is how it mentions it in the Bible Project as well. But I have read other accounts where he was hanged as well.
That's interesting.
Before we got to that, though, I love it because basically Mordecai then at that stage gets Esther to reveal what's been going on with Haman's plan to have the Jews eradicated. Sounds familiar, by the way. And when he's found out, the king, again, probably with a little bit of alcohol in his system, is like, right, you're going to be thrown up on that pole, gallows, whatever. And then at that stage, he is begging Esther for his life. And that is 7-7. So it had to be mentioned, Esther 7-7. Just how the tables have turned. He's trying to eradicate these people and have them killed. Suddenly he's begging Esther for his own life.
So apparently historically it's more likely it would have been impalement than hanging, so you're absolutely right. Esther, what I was going to say, sorry, from Esther 7:7 as well, is if you have evil in your heart, don't be surprised when it comes back around to get you, right? Like, Christians don't exactly believe in karma, obviously, but we do believe that the wages for sin is eventually death, and therefore, logically, like, sin will harm you and harm others along the way, as we all know, right? So that doesn't surprise me at all. Hopping into 8, many of the people in the land became Jews after all of this. So they had seen how God had worked through this. Like you said, God isn't mentioned in the book of Esther directly, but we see God's hand. A bit like, what was it? Was it Ruth as well? I think it's the same sort of thing, right? So just the fact that so many people in the land saw what had happened, realized that the Jews were worshipping the true God and therefore converted. So out of all of this, God is glorified and more people come to him.
Yeah, that's cool. And that's super interesting because the edict had been passed that the Jews should be eradicated. So the fact that people are then choosing to continue to become Jewish, to convert to Judaism, is massive. And what I didn't realize, I was reading through this then in Esther 8 and into Esther 9, where it's like they actually all start fighting back and killing Haman's family and stuff. I was like, why? Once it had been found out, couldn't they have been like, yo, guys, don't go killing the Jewish people? But what I didn't realize that basically once an edict had been signed, and because it mentioned in 8, 8:8, so I've done 7:7, I'll do 8:8. For no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked. So basically they couldn't turn around and say, don't go killing Jews. So what they did instead was they wrote another edict that says, all right, Jews, time for you to defend yourselves and fight back, because they'd spun this little dice thingy that determined when that was going to happen. So it's still happening. But essentially what King Xerxes has done now is combine the two to make a giant kingdom-wide Royal Rumble. The Jews versus the non-Jews, just have at it. So yeah, so friggin' insane.
I had something on 9:14 as well. Sorry about that quick thing. But anyway, they hanged, as you say, all of Haman's 10 sons. What's really interesting about this is Haman and his sons were descendants of the ancient Amalekites. And God commanded Saul, the son of Kish, to execute the full extent of God's judgment against the Amalekites. That's in 1 Samuel 15. But Saul failed. So this then later descendant of the tribe of Benjamin and a son of Kish named Mordecai, right? Mordecai finally completes God's judgment against the Amalekites all the way back in 1 Samuel.
That's cool.
How sick's that?
That's really good. That's good. Because I read that. What's that?
I was just going to say thank enduringword.com, not me, because that was all enduringword.com.
Yeah, I read that bit with the whole, like, they went out and they impaled the 10 sons as well. I was like, surely that's not cool. Surely there needs to be some forgiveness. But again, that's where actually when you look at Esther and Mordecai, they weren't necessarily the best
righteous or whatever.
Yeah. But God using wrong uns on every spectrum. Like, you don't have to be a complete wrong un for God to use you. But I was like, going out and just intentionally killing dude's 10 sons, like, what would Jesus do? Like, throw out one of them. Obviously he's not been born yet, but whatever.
Yeah, agreed. I don't have anything more, mate.
Oh, all right, I'll keep chatting. We've got like a minute and a half to keep chatting for. What are you doing? All right, Esther 10. Esther 10's a tiny little chapter, isn't it? It's only 3 verses. But just love how, sort of slightly before this, Mordecai and Esther, where was it mentioned? Can't find it exactly, but they were given all Haman's land and Haman's property and Haman's everything. So they were rewarded for what they did. It's just they didn't push that through and fight for it. They just got it in God's timing. But then right at the end here, essentially it says that Mordecai, because he worked for the good of his people and spoke up for the welfare of all the Jews. So he was doing it for the right reasons. He wasn't doing it to get stuff. He was doing it for the good of his people, and he spoke up for the welfare of all the Jews. And that is such a Jesus thing, right? That's what he wants for us. He wants us to stand up for those that can't stand up for themselves, to speak up for those that can't. And it's just a fantastic thing.
Yeah, that's good, man.
Cool, appreciate that. Smashing. Well, tomorrow's readings are in the book of Job, and it's Job 1, 2, 3, and 4. So why don't you beautiful people pick up your Bible, get reading.
In the meantime, please consider joining us on social media at 2 Brits in the Bible and sharing this with someone to help spread the word of God.
You know what? You might get an accent tomorrow.
Ooh.